Tell them I was never here." Evelyn Carter whispered the words so softly that even the stone walls seemed to hold their breath. Outside her narrow chamber, the northern fortress shook with music, boots, and winter wind. The choosing hall was only 3 corridors away, but it might as well have been another world. There were candles there, silver banners, fine gowns brushing over polished floors. Omega daughters with painted lips and perfect posture, each one hoping the Alpha King would look at her long enough to change her bloodline forever. Evelyn sat alone in a room without windows, wrapped in a plain gray dress that had been mended twice at the sleeve. A strip of soft cloth covered her blind eyes, not because it helped, but because people preferred not to see what had happened to them. The air smelled of cold iron, old smoke, and the lavender oil one servant had rubbed on her wrists out of pity. Pity always had a smell. Too sweet, too careful, too late. A young maid stood near the door, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Evelyn could hear the nervous scrape of her shoe against the floor. "Miss Carter," the girl said, voice trembling. "They asked if you wanted anything before the ceremony ends." Evelyn smiled, but it was a small, tired thing. "Yes." The maid leaned closer. "What is it?" Evelyn turned her face toward the sound of the celebration, toward the life her family had decided she was no longer fit to enter. "Tell them I was never here." The maid did not answer. Somewhere beyond the walls, a horn sounded, low and deep, rolling through the fortress like thunder trapped under ice. Every conversation outside seemed to fall away at once. Evelyn felt it before she understood it. A pressure in the air, a silence with weight. King Adrian Blackwell had arrived. She had heard stories about the Alpha King of the North since childhood, though none of them agreed on whether he was a man or winter wearing a crown. They said he was tall enough to make warhorses look small, that his skin was pale from the northern cold, his eyes gray as frozen rivers, and his heart colder than both. They said he never raised his voice because no one survived long in his court by needing to be told twice. Evelyn did not know if any of that was true. She only knew the fortress changed when he entered it. The servants stopped whispering. The fire seemed to crackle lower. Even the wind pressed itself flat against the walls, listening. In the choosing hall, names were announced one by one. Beautiful names, useful names, daughters of houses with lands, armies, and clean family records. Evelyn's name was not spoken. It had not been spoken in public for 3 years. Not since the fever took her sight and left behind a daughter her father could no longer trade with pride. Her fingers found the edge of the wooden chair beneath her. She counted the grooves in it. 1, 2, 3. A grounding habit. A way to remain inside her body when the world became too large. Then the music stopped. Not faded. Stopped. A door opened somewhere far down the corridor. Heavy hinges groaned. Men murmured. A woman gasped. The maid beside Evelyn inhaled sharply. Evelyn lifted her head. Footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. Not hurried, because power never had to hurry. Each step struck the stone floor with quiet certainty, coming closer until the cold in the room felt different. Not emptier. Sharper. The maid dropped into a curtsy so fast her dress whispered against the floor. Evelyn did not move. She did not know where to look. She hated that most of all. The door opened fully. For a moment, no one spoke. Evelyn heard only the faint shift of a cloak, the soft creak of leather gloves, and a steady breath that did not belong to a servant. Then a male voice filled the room, low and calm, with the weight of snow before an avalanche. "Why is there an Omega hidden behind a locked door?" No one answered him. The silence became afraid. Evelyn lowered her chin, hands tightening in her lap. "Your Majesty," she said, keeping her voice even because pride was the last thing they had not taken from her. "You are in the wrong room." A pause. Then the floorboards gave one quiet sound as he stepped inside. "Am I?" She felt him there, impossibly present, blocking the draft from the hall. The lavender on her wrists vanished beneath the scent of winter air, cedar smoke, and clean steel. "Yes," she said. "The women you came to see are in the hall. I saw them." 2 words. Nothing more. Yet something in Evelyn's chest tightened. He had seen them and still come here. That made no sense. Men like Adrian Blackwell did not search forgotten rooms unless someone had made a mistake worth punishing. She turned her face away from him. "Then please do not look at me." The maid made a small sound, horrified. Evelyn waited for anger. For insult. for the familiar soft cruelty of someone trying to sound kind while agreeing she was broken. Instead, the room went still. Then the Alpha King moved. Not toward the door. Toward her. His boots stopped close enough that she could feel warmth through the cold. Fabric shifted. A heavy cloak settled gently around her shoulders, lined with fur, carrying the outside air and the quiet authority of the man who wore it. Evelyn froze. No one had touched her gently in so long that her body mistook it for danger. "I am not here to look," Adrian said. His voice was lower now, near enough that she knew he had knelt before her. The thought struck the room like lightning without sound. A king, kneeling, before the blind Omega they had hidden away. Evelyn's breath caught. "Then why are you here?" she whispered. For the first time, his answer did not sound like command. It sounded almost like memory. Because everyone in that hall wanted to be chosen. His pause was brief, but she felt it. "You were the only one asking to disappear." For a long moment, Evelyn could not answer him. The cloak around her shoulders was too heavy, too warm, too real. It belonged to a king who had crossed a hall full of perfect daughters and stopped in front of a door meant to keep shame out of sight. She heard the maid breathing too quickly near the wall. She heard distant noblemen shifting in the corridor, their boots scraping stone as they tried to understand whether they had witnessed mercy or insult. Adrian did not move. He waited as if waiting was not beneath him. Evelyn swallowed. "I was not asking to disappear for your benefit, Your Majesty." "I know." "Then you should leave." A quiet breath left him. Not a laugh. Something colder, softer, almost human. "People have told me that for most of my life." She turned her covered eyes toward him despite herself. "And do you?" "No." The answer was simple enough to frighten her. There was no charm in it. No performance. Only a fact, placed between them like a blade set down on a table. In the hall, a man cleared his throat. Evelyn recognized the sound before he spoke. Her father, Lord Malcolm Carter. His voice always carried the polished edge of someone who had practiced kindness in mirrors. "Your Majesty, forgive the confusion. My daughter is unwell." She was not meant to disturb the proceedings. Evelyn's fingers tightened beneath the cloak. Adrian rose to his feet. The room seemed to grow smaller when he stood. She did not disturb anything. "Of course," Lord Carter said quickly. "Still, Evelyn has been fragile since her illness. She requires quiet, familiar surroundings. She would be of no interest to the Northern Throne." The words landed gently. That was how her father did cruelty. He wrapped it in concern so no one had to feel guilty holding it. Evelyn kept her head bowed. She had learned the safest shape was a small one. Adrian's voice did not change. "You locked her behind stone during a royal choosing. For her comfort." No, a single word. It cut through the room without being loud. The corridor went silent. Evelyn felt the maid flinch. Lord Carter paused, and for the first time in years, Evelyn heard uncertainty in him. "Your Majesty?" Adrian took one step toward the doorway. "For yours." No one breathed. Even Evelyn forgot to count the grooves in the chair. A second nobleman spoke from beyond the threshold, older, nervous, trying to repair what had already cracked. "The girl cannot serve as Luna of the North. She cannot read a treaty, cannot survey a battlefield, cannot stand before the houses without assistance. Surely your Majesty understands the burden." Adrian said nothing at first. Leather creaked as he removed one glove. Then the other. Evelyn heard them placed on a nearby table with careful precision. "Bring the contract of offering." Lord Carter's voice changed at once. "The contract? You presented your house to mine tonight." "Yes, but through my younger daughter. Vivian is prepared, educated, and entirely suitable. I asked for the contract." A servant ran. Paper whispered. Wax seals tapped against wood. Evelyn felt the room tilting around her. "No," she said before she could stop herself. Every face turned toward her. She could feel it like heat. Adrian's attention returned to her, steady and impossible to hide from. "No." Evelyn forced herself to stand. The cloak slipped slightly, and she caught it with one hand. Her knees trembled, but her voice did not. "Do not use me to punish them." Lord Carter made a sharp sound. "Evelyn." She ignored him. Her world was darkness. But darkness had taught her where people stood. Her father near the door, ashamed only of being exposed. The maid by the wall, afraid and heartbroken. The Alpha King directly ahead, silent as snowfall. "I will not be another weapon in this house," Evelyn said. "Not theirs. Not yours." The room held still. Then Adrian answered, quieter than before. Good. That single word unsettled her more than anger would have. Good. A queen should know the difference. Lord Carter gave a strained laugh. Your Majesty, she is confused. Adrian's voice hardened at last. Not loud. Never loud. But the air changed when he spoke. If anyone calls her confused again, they will explain to the Northern Council why they fear a woman who can hear the truth better than they can speak it. Evelyn felt the words move through the room like a door opening in winter. Cold. Clean. Final. The servant returned with the contract. A quill scratched. Wax warmed. Someone whispered a prayer. Then Adrian spoke for all of them to hear. From this moment, Evelyn Carter is under the protection of the Northern Crown. Lord Carter exhaled as if struck by invisible weather. Protection is one thing. Claiming is another. Adrian turned back to Evelyn. She could feel him waiting again, not taking, not forcing, not deciding over the top of her bowed head. Miss Carter, he said, and somehow the formality felt like respect instead of distance. The North is cold. The court is worse. I will not lie and call it kindness. But no locked doors wait for you there. Evelyn closed her hands around the cloak. For 3 years, every choice had been made around her, above her, without her. Now the most dangerous man in the room had offered a door instead of a cage. Her voice came out barely louder than breath. And if I say no? Adrian answered at once. Then I leave this room, and the door stays open behind me. That was when Evelyn understood why the hall had gone silent for him. Not because he was cruel, because when he gave his word, even the powerful believed it. She turned toward the corridor, toward the family that had hidden her from candlelight, music, and memory. Then she faced the king she could not see. Then take me north, she whispered, before I become brave enough to stay forgotten. The northern carriage left before midnight, without music, without blessing, and without a single member of House Carter brave enough to say farewell. Evelyn sat inside with Adrian's cloak still around her shoulders and both hands folded tight in her lap. The carriage was larger than any she had ridden in before, built of dark wood and lined with thick wool, yet she felt every turn of the wheels beneath her feet. Gravel became frozen road. Frozen road became open country. The fortress behind them faded not by sight, but by sound. First the voices disappeared, then the gates, then the last bell of her father's house, ringing once in the cold as if remembering too late that she had ever lived there. Across from her, Adrian Blackwell sat in silence. Not the empty silence of neglect, a guarded one, a silence that kept its hands visible. Evelyn could hear the faint rasp of his sleeve when he moved, the soft click of a signet ring against the carriage armrest, the steady rhythm of breath that did not rush even when the wind shoved hard against the windows. "You are staring," she said. The words escaped before she could soften them. A pause. No, her mouth tightened. People always do. "I am listening." Evelyn turned her face toward him. Outside, snow brushed the glass in dry little scratches. "To what?" "Whether you are afraid." She almost laughed, but the sound died before it became anything. That must be difficult to miss. Not all fear sounds the same. Something about the answer unsettled her. It was too specific, too practiced, as if he knew fear in more forms than she wanted to imagine. She drew the cloak closer. "And what does mine sound like?" Adrian was quiet long enough that she thought he would refuse. Then he said, like someone holding a door shut from the inside. Evelyn's fingers stilled. For 3 years, everyone had described her with words that made her smaller. Fragile, damaged, unfortunate, unfit. No one had ever described the effort it took to keep breathing beneath those words. The carriage rolled over a rough patch of road, and her shoulder bumped the wall. Before she could steady herself, Adrian's hand moved. Not touching her, only bracing the side rail near her elbow, close enough to stop her from falling, far enough to let the choice remain hers. The restraint of it struck harder than contact. "There are blankets beneath your seat," he said. "Food in the left compartment. Water in a sealed flask. The latch is shaped like a crescent." Evelyn found it with her fingertips, exactly where he said it would be. The metal was cool and smooth, designed to be read by touch. She opened the compartment slowly. Bread, wrapped in cloth. A small jar of honey. Dried apples. Nothing fancy. Nothing that smelled like ceremony. Real food. Travel food. Food meant for someone expected to continue. Her throat tightened without permission. "Did you prepare this?" "My steward did." Because you told him to. Yes. She broke off a piece of bread, but did not eat it. Why? Adrian leaned back. Leather gave a quiet creak. Because the ride is 180 miles. Because the roads freeze after midnight. Because hungry people make poor decisions. It was such a practical answer that it nearly hurt. No grand promise. No pity dressed as devotion. Just bread, water, distance, weather. The plain architecture of care. Evelyn lifted the bread to her lips. It was still soft in the center. For a while, the carriage held only the sound of wheels and winter. Then a new scent reached her, faint but sharp beneath the cedar and wool. Ink. Paper. Old wax. You are reading, she said. I was. In the dark. There is a lantern. Heat rose in her cheeks. Of course. He did not apologize for her blindness. He did not rush to cover the small wound in the conversation. He simply let it exist without turning it into a tragedy. That, too, was unfamiliar. What were you reading? She asked. Reports from the Northern Council. About me? Now yes. The honesty landed cleanly. Evelyn closed her hand around the bread. And what do they say? That I acted impulsively. That House Carter will be offended. That the North requires a Luna with clear sight, stable alliances, and public approval. They are right. About which part? She almost answered all of it. The old answer. The safe answer. Instead, she listened to the carriage, to the road carrying her farther from the room where she had asked to vanish. About public approval, she said. Adrian's breathing changed, barely. Interest, maybe. Not the rest. I do not know yet. A long silence followed. Then he folded the report. Paper whispered like snow sliding from a roof. That is the first honest political answer I have heard all week. Evelyn turned away, but this time she did not hide. Beyond the carriage walls, the North waited in miles of white forest and frozen rivers. Behind her, a locked room was becoming smaller with every turn of the wheels. She did not feel rescued. Not yet. Rescue was too bright a word for what this was. This felt colder, stranger, like standing barefoot at the edge of a frozen lake, hearing the ice crack, and realizing the sound beneath it was not breaking. It was waking up. By dawn, the carriage reached the first gate of the northern capital, and Evelyn knew it not by sight, but by sound. The road changed beneath the wheels, from frozen dirt to stone laid so tightly that the carriage no longer jolted. The wind grew crowded. It carried iron from the gate chains, smoke from hundreds of chimneys, horse sweat, pine tar, and the clean mineral scent of snow packed hard by many feet. Somewhere high above, a bell rang 6 times, each note deep enough to settle in her ribs. The city was awake. The North was awake, and it was listening. Adrian had said little in the final hour of the journey. He had not slept, or if he had, he did it like a soldier, without letting his breath change. Evelyn sat with the half-eaten bread wrapped in cloth beside her and her palms resting on the wool blanket. She had taken off the gray strip from her eyes sometime before sunrise. There was no reason for it. Darkness remained darkness. But the cloth had belonged to her old room, to old hands, to people who covered what made them uncomfortable and called it mercy. She held it now in her lap like a shed skin. The carriage slowed. Voices rose outside. Guards. Servants. Courtiers pretending not to hurry. Metal armor shifted in neat lines. The door opened, and cold air swept in so sharply Evelyn almost leaned away from it. Adrian stepped out first. The city quieted in layers. Boots stopped. Harness bells stilled. Even the horses seemed to lower their heads. Then his hand appeared near the doorway. Not grabbing. Not commanding. Waiting. Evelyn felt the space where choice lived. She placed her fingers lightly over his. His hand was warm despite the cold, broad and steady, with a callus near the base of his thumb. He guided her down 2 steps onto stone. The moment her shoes touched the ground, the whispers began. They were not loud, but blindness had made Evelyn rich in small sounds. She heard the quick inhale of a maid, the clipped disapproval of an older woman, the rustle of expensive coats turning toward one another. Blind. Carter girl. Mistake. Pity. Spell. Adrian did not silence them. Not yet. He only adjusted his pace to hers, slow enough that she would not stumble, natural enough that no one could call it assistance. His arm stayed close beside her, a wall without becoming a cage. The palace doors opened ahead with a sound like winter splitting. Warmth rolled out from within, carrying beeswax, cedar logs, polished stone, and something bright and bitter, maybe orange peel simmering in a copper pot. Evelyn stepped inside and heard the ceiling before she understood its height. Every footstep rose and returned, softened by tapestries and distance. This was not a house. It was a mountain taught to kneel. "Your Majesty," a man said from the right, his voice smooth and sharp around the edges. "The council has assembled earlier than expected." Adrian's answer was calm. "Of course they have. They are requesting immediate clarification regarding the lady." The lady, not guest, not prisoner, not mistake. Evelyn turned her face toward the voice. The man smelled of parchment, expensive soap, and worry held too tightly. Adrian did not look away from her. She felt it in the direction of his silence. "Evelyn Carter," he said, "this is Thomas Reed, my chief steward. He will arrange anything you require." Thomas bowed. She heard the fabric shift. "Lady Evelyn, welcome to Blackwell Palace." The title struck her strangely. Lady Evelyn. In her father's house, her name had become a thing people lowered their voices around. Here, a stranger placed rank before it and let it stand. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was rough from the cold. Thomas seemed to notice. "Warm tea has been prepared. No cinnamon." His Majesty was uncertain whether strong spice would trouble you after travel. Evelyn went still. Adrian had noticed she had not touched the spiced wine offered at the Carter Fortress. She had set it aside after one breath because cinnamon reminded her of the medicine they forced on her during the fever. No one else had noticed. No one else had cared to. Adrian turned to Thomas. "Her rooms. Prepared as instructed. No mirrors. Removed. No eastern windows. Covered. The morning glare will not reach the sitting room. The bell pulls. Wrapped in cloth so they make no sudden sound." Evelyn stood very still in the enormous hall, surrounded by people who had already decided she was the king's heir, while the king calmly listed the shape of her fears as if they were matters of state. Heat gathered behind her eyes, useless and painful. She forced it down. "You did not have to change your palace for me," she said. Adrian's voice came from close beside her. "I did not." She almost smiled at the lie. Then he added, "I changed one room." Thomas cleared his throat softly. "The council, Your Majesty." Adrian's silence cooled the hall again. "Let them wait." A woman gasped somewhere behind a column. Evelyn knew then the council was not accustomed to waiting. Adrian offered his arm. "You should rest. And if they say I am hiding, then they will be wrong twice in one day." She took his arm. This time, not because she needed balance. Because he had offered it in front of everyone, and the entire court needed to hear her accept. As they crossed the hall, the whispers followed, but they sounded different now. Less certain. More careful. Evelyn counted 12 steps to the first runner carpet, 6 more to the turn, then the faint crackle of a fireplace ahead. Blackwell Palace did not welcome her gently. It watched her with cold eyes and old rules. But beneath the stone, beneath the politics, beneath the breathless judgment of a court that valued sight over truth, Evelyn felt one impossible thing beginning to take root. For the first time in years, the world around her was not asking her to become smaller. It was making room. The room Adrian had prepared for Evelyn was not beautiful in the way noble houses understood beauty. There were no tall mirrors, no jeweled lamps, no painted portraits watching from the walls. It was warmer than beauty. Quieter. The floor had thick rugs that softened every step. The furniture edges were rounded beneath her fingertips. The bed stood low enough that she could sit without searching for it. A fire breathed steadily in the hearth, not roaring, not snapping, just keeping the cold at a respectful distance. Someone had placed a bowl of oranges on the table, each one scored lightly at the top so the scent could rise without overwhelming the air. Beside them sat a stack of books with raised lettering, a porcelain cup of tea, and a small silver bell wrapped in velvet so it would not startle her when moved. Evelyn touched each object slowly, not because she needed to understand the room, because she needed to believe it had been made for her and not for the version of her people pitted. Thomas Reed stood near the doorway, hands folded, voice careful. His Majesty asked that the room be arranged for independence, not supervision. Evelyn paused with her fingers on the spine of a book. Those were his words. Exact words, my lady. Independence. The word entered her quietly and found places in her that had gone unused. At the Carter Fortress, help had always arrived with a sigh. A hand on her elbow before she asked. A chair pulled out too loudly. A servant speaking about her as if blindness had moved her mind somewhere far away. Here, every object seemed to say the same impossible thing. You may reach for me yourself. Thomas continued. The left wall has a guide rail from the bed to the sitting room. The wardrobe is arranged by texture. Wool on the top shelf, linen in the middle, formal gowns on the lower hooks. The tea table is always 12 steps from the hearth unless you request otherwise. Evelyn turned toward him. You counted the steps? His Majesty did. The answer was so plain that she forgot how to breathe for a moment. Outside the room, distant voices rose and fell, muffled by heavy doors. The council had not stopped waiting. Men and women of old houses were somewhere below, turning her name into a problem with legal edges. Yet Adrian had spent part of the journey, or perhaps part of the night before, measuring the distance between a fireplace and a tea table for a woman he had not known existed until hours ago. Evelyn sat in the armchair nearest the hearth. The fabric was soft but not delicate, the kind of chair meant to be lived in, not admired. Does he do this for everyone? She asked. Thomas was silent just long enough to answer honestly. No footsteps sounded in the hall. Heavy, measured, familiar already, which frightened her more than it should have. Thomas bowed even before the knock came. 3 taps. Low on the door, not high. Evelyn understood the choice. A sound made where she could locate it easily. Come in, she said. Adrian entered without the cold following him this time. He smelled of outside air, ink, and the faint smoke of the council chamber. Thomas excused himself, leaving the door open until Evelyn heard Adrian stop beside it. May I close it? He asked. Such a small question. Such a devastating one. She nodded. The latch clicked softly. Adrian did not approach until she spoke again. You made them wait. Yes. They will blame me. They already did. Her fingers tightened around the cup. And you let them? I listened. Why? Because people reveal more when they think judgment has not yet entered the room. Evelyn lifted her face toward him. The fire warmed one side of her cheek. The other remained cool. And what did they reveal? Adrian crossed the room, stopping several feet away. Close enough for conversation. Far enough for respect. That they fear weakness more than dishonor. She gave a small, humorless smile. Then they must be terrified of me. No, his answer came too quickly. They are terrified that I am not. The words settled between them, heavier than the winter outside. Evelyn did not know what to do with a man who refused to call her broken, refused to call himself kind, and refused to pretend the world would be gentle just because he had opened a door. Your Majesty, she said, you should not confuse gratitude with loyalty. I do not. Or rescue with trust. I do not. Or protection with love. This time, silence answered first. It was not offended. It was careful. Adrian moved to the window, though she knew it had been covered. She heard the curtain fabric shift under his hand. My father believed love made kings careless, he said. My council believes the same. I have not decided whether they are wrong. Evelyn felt the honesty like cold water. Then why bring me here? The fire popped once, soft as a secret. Adrian turned back. Because when you stood in that locked room, you still told me no. She did not understand. Most people say yes to power, he said, even when they hate it, especially when they fear it. You did not. Evelyn looked down at the tea she had not tasted. Steam brushed her face. I was afraid. I know. I still am. Good. Her head rose. Good. His voice softened, almost imperceptibly. Fear means you understand the door is open. A cage does not frighten the same way freedom does. Evelyn sat very still. Outside, the northern court waited to decide what she was worth. Inside, an alpha king stood in a room without mirrors and spoke to her, as if her choices mattered more than her usefulness. She lifted the cup at last and took one careful sip. The tea was warm, honeyed, and free of cinnamon. A tiny thing, a remembered thing. Adrian noticed, but he did not comment. That was his kindness. She was beginning to learn. Not the grand gesture people applauded. The quiet correction of a world that had hurt her in ways no one else bothered to name. For the first time since the fever took her sight, Evelyn did not feel watched. She felt witnessed. And in the north, where every wall was stone and every law was sharpened by winter, that felt more dangerous than any crown. The council waited until the 7th bell to make its judgment sound polite. Evelyn heard them before she entered the chamber. 12 voices behind one door, folded beneath manners, moving like knives under silk. Adrian walked beside her through the long corridor without touching her, though his arm remained close enough for her to find if she chose. She did not. Not this time. The rug beneath her shoes changed from wool to bare stone, and the air grew colder, carrying the scent of ink, candle wax, old paper, and people who had already decided the ending. Thomas announced them. His Majesty, King Adrian Blackwell, and Lady Evelyn Carter. The room went still. Chairs shifted. Fabric rustled. Someone's ring tapped once against a glass. Evelyn counted the sounds because counting kept her breath steady. 12 counselors. 3 near the windows. 4 along the table. 2 standing. 1 breathing too loudly. 1 pretending not to whisper. 1 afraid. Adrian led her to the head of the chamber, then stopped. "You may speak," he said. Not to Evelyn. To them. A woman answered first, her voice elegant and thin. "Your Majesty, the Council is grateful for your swift return. We only wish to clarify the nature of Lady Evelyn's presence before rumors weaken the court." Evelyn almost smiled. Rumors did not weaken courts. Truth did. Adrian said nothing. The woman continued. "The North requires stability. Aluna must guide public ceremonies, read petitions, identify threats, and represent the strength of our people. Lady Evelyn's circumstances are unfortunate, but compassion cannot be the foundation of a crown." The word compassion landed softly, like a glove placed over a wound to hide the color of it. Evelyn stood with her hands folded, feeling the heat of every gaze. Another counselor spoke, older and rougher. "House Blackwell has survived because its rulers choose duty over impulse. The bloodline needs clarity. The people need certainty. Your Majesty needs a mate the realm can trust." A mate. The word moved through the room with careful weight. Not beloved. Not partner. A function. A seal. A body beside a throne. Evelyn felt something inside her go quiet. Not broken. Decided. Adrian's voice came low from beside her. "Lady Evelyn is standing in the room. Address her if you are discussing her." Silence opened. It was not respectful. It was startled. The elegant woman recovered first. "Lady Evelyn, forgive our directness. Do you believe you are prepared to stand as Luna of the North?" The honest answer was no. Evelyn could have said it. She could have bowed her head, made herself small, given them the relief they wanted. Instead, she listened. The woman's breath was too smooth. Practiced. The older man's foot tapped twice under the table. Irritation. The afraid one near the far wall swallowed every few seconds, as if holding back a secret. Evelyn lifted her chin. "No." A murmur passed through the chamber. The woman exhaled in satisfaction. Adrian did not move. Evelyn continued. "I am not prepared to be what you already decided Aluna must be." The murmur stopped. "I cannot read ink on paper," she said. "I cannot admire banners. I cannot stand on a balcony and measure the crowd by sight. If that is all the North needs, then you are right. I am useless to you." The word did not hurt when she chose it herself. It sounded different in her own mouth. Less like a chain, more like a key turning. "But I can hear when a servant has been crying before she enters a room. I can tell which guard is limping by the drag of his left heel. I can smell fever before a physician admits it. I know when people lower their voices because they are ashamed, and when they do it because they are planning something. I survived 3 years in a house that wanted me invisible. Do not confuse blindness with ignorance." No one spoke. The candles hissed softly. Somewhere outside, wind pressed snow against the high windows. Evelyn felt Adrian's attention on her, but this time it did not make her smaller. The older counselor cleared his throat. "Those are admirable sensitivities, my lady, but a kingdom is not run on feelings." Evelyn turned her covered eyes toward him. "No, it is often ruined by people pretending they do not have any." The ring against the glass stopped tapping. Adrian's breath changed, a quiet thing that might have been the beginning of pride. Then the afraid counselor near the wall shifted. His sleeve brushed parchment. A small sound. Too small for most. Not for Evelyn. She faced him. "You brought a second document." The room chilled. The man did not answer. Adrian's voice dropped. "Lord Hayes." Paper crackled. The man's heartbeat was suddenly loud in Evelyn's ears, fast as a trapped bird. "It was only a precaution," Lord Hayes said, "in case the council needed an alternative proposal." Adrian did not raise his voice. "Read it." No one moved. Thomas stepped forward, took the document, and after one glance, went silent. Adrian asked again, colder. "Read it." Thomas swallowed. It is a petition to remove Lady Evelyn from royal protection and transfer her to a secluded estate until the matter of succession is resolved. Evelyn felt the room tilt, but her feet held. A secluded estate. A prettier locked room. A quieter disappearance. Adrian's next words were almost gentle. That made them worse. The council is dismissed. Chairs scraped at once. No one argued. Power did not need volume when the whole room had heard the truth fall onto the table. As they filed out, Evelyn remained still. She had wanted to disappear once. The North had nearly offered to help. Then Adrian's hand stopped near hers, not touching. Waiting. You heard what they tried to hide, he said. Evelyn breathed in the cold candle smoke and folded her fingers around nothing. No, she whispered. I heard what they thought I was too broken to notice. The council chamber emptied, but the cold it left behind followed Evelyn back through the palace. It clung to the walls, slipped beneath doors, and settled into the quiet places where fear liked to wait. By evening, Blackwell Palace no longer whispered about whether she belonged there. It whispered about what she had heard. That was worse. A weak woman could be pitted. A sharp one had to be managed. Evelyn knew the difference. She had lived inside both judgments. Adrian ordered guards placed along her corridor, then told them to stand far enough away that their armor would not wake her. He did not explain the order. He rarely explained anything. But that night, while the palace slept beneath a heavy fall of snow, Evelyn sat by the hearth with her shoes on and listened to men pretending not to move outside her door. One set of footsteps passed twice, too light for a palace guard. A servant, perhaps, or someone wearing soft soles on purpose. She waited until the sound faded. Then she rose. The guide rail led her from the sitting room to the wardrobe, then to the small side door Thomas had mentioned only once. A service passage. Narrow, drafty, used by maids carrying linens before sunrise. Evelyn had not planned to leave. Plans required hope. This was something quieter. If the council feared her enough to hide papers in open chambers, they would not stop. They would turn Adrian's court against him one careful rumor at a time. The North needed certainty. She had heard that sentence in too many voices. Certainty had always been another word for removing the inconvenient. She wrapped Adrian's cloak over her shoulders, paused at the door, and touched the velvet-wrapped bell without ringing it. For one foolish second, she imagined calling him. She imagined his measured steps, his low voice, his refusal to let the world make her smaller. Then she remembered the council saying bloodline, stability, mate, burden. She left before bravery could change its mind. The service passage smelled of cold dust and stored wood. Her fingers followed the rough wall. 22 steps. Turn left. 12 steps. 3 down. 1 iron latch. The outside air struck her face like a hand dipped in ice water. Snow fell without sound. The courtyard stones were slick beneath her shoes, but she moved slowly, counting by memory, by scent, by the distant rush of the fountain frozen at its edges. No one stopped her. That hurt more than she expected. Beyond the rear gate, the palace grounds opened into pine forest. Evelyn knew she should have been terrified. Instead, she felt the strange, aching relief of a door closing behind her by her own choice. For nearly a mile, she followed the wind downhill. Branches whispered above. Snow brushed her hem. Somewhere far off, an owl called once and then thought better of it. Then the forest changed. The silence tightened. Evelyn stopped. There were people ahead. 3. No, 4. Their breathing was hidden badly. Men who feared discovery more than winter. Lady Carter, one of them said. He sounded almost pleased. You made this easier than expected. Evelyn turned, but another set of footsteps closed behind her. No one touched her. Not yet. That was how she knew they wanted her frightened, not harmed. Lord Hayes sent you, she said. A pause too long. The council sends its concern. Concern has busy hands tonight. The man gave a soft laugh. You are clever. That is unfortunate. Evelyn held Adrian's cloak closed at her throat. If you plan to drag me back to a locked room, at least have the courage to call it what it is. Snow shifted under his boots. The North cannot afford a blind Luna. The words should have broken something. They did not. They landed where all the others had landed and found no room left. Then, beneath the wind, beneath the men, beneath her own hard breathing, Evelyn felt something pull inside her chest. Not pain, not thought. A thread drawn tight across distance. Her hand pressed against her sternum. The forest seemed to inhale. Miles away, or perhaps only minutes, Adrian Blackwell felt it too. She knew it without knowing how. The men around her fell quiet. One whispered, "Did you hear that?" At first, Evelyn heard nothing. Then came the sound. Slow footsteps in snow. One person, not running, not hurrying, coming through the dark with the terrible calm of winter returning to its throne. The men stepped back before Adrian spoke. "You took something under my protection." His voice was low, almost gentle, and every pine in the forest seemed to hold still around it. "Now return her to my side." Evelyn did not move. She could not see him, but she felt him there, larger than fear, carrying the cold with him and somehow making it feel safe. The man ahead tried to speak. "Your Majesty, we were acting for the good of the realm." Adrian answered with silence. It was enough. Fabric shifted. Knees touched snow, one after another, not from injury, not from force, but from the sudden understanding that power had arrived and found them small. Evelyn's breath trembled. "I did not call you," she whispered. Adrian's footsteps stopped beside her. His hand hovered near hers, waiting as always. "No," he said. "But this time, you did not have to." The men in the snow did not rise until Adrian told them to. Even then, they moved as if the forest itself had turned against them. No one shouted. No one begged. The North had always understood quiet consequences better than loud ones. Adrian gave 3 orders in a voice so controlled it seemed carved from ice. The men would return to the palace under guard. Lord Hayes would be confined to his chambers until morning council. No servant, soldier, or noble would speak Evelyn's name unless they were prepared to speak it with respect. Then he turned toward her, and the entire forest seemed to soften by one breath. "Are you hurt?" Evelyn shook her head. Snow had gathered in her hair, cold pinpricks melting against her scalp. Her hands were numb around the edges of his cloak. "No, cold." "Yes." He removed his gloves and placed them in her hands. They were still warm from him, lined with wool, too large for her fingers. She almost refused. Pride rose by habit, exhausted and stubborn. Then she remembered what he had said in the carriage. Hungry people make poor decisions. Perhaps cold people did too. She slipped them on. Adrian did not comment. Behind them, the guards led the council's men away through the trees. Their footsteps faded into the snowfall. When the forest was empty again, Evelyn heard Adrian step closer, then stop. Always stopping. Always leaving one last inch for her to cross. "Why did you leave?" he asked. Not angry. That would have been easier. Anger could be answered with defense. This was worse. This was concern stripped of accusation. Evelyn faced the place where his voice stood. "Because they are right about one thing." "Which thing?" "I am a problem for you." Wind moved through the pines. Snow sifted down from a branch and landed softly nearby. Adrian said nothing, but his silence had changed. It no longer waited. It endured. Evelyn's voice thinned despite her effort. "They will keep using me. Every vote, every alliance, every rumor. I know what it is like to become the reason a room turns cold. I lived that way for 3 years. I will not do it to you." "To me." His repetition was quiet. "Yes. You thought leaving would protect me. I thought it would end the argument." "It would have." The answer struck her still. Adrian continued. "They would have called you unstable by morning. They would have thanked me for my compassion by noon. By sunset, they would have begun offering replacements." Evelyn closed her eyes, though darkness did not change. "Then why stop me?" His breath moved closer. "Because a kingdom that requires your disappearance to remain stable deserves to tremble." She could not speak. The words entered too deeply, not as flattery, not as comfort, but as judgment against every hand that had ever guided her into shadow and called it peace. Adrian's voice lowered. "Evelyn, I do not need a court that looks strong while hiding its cruelty in locked rooms. I have seen that kind of strength. It rots from the inside." She felt the thread in her chest again, the strange pull that had led him to her through a mile of snow and silence. It trembled now, warm beneath her ribs. "What is happening?" she whispered. Adrian did not pretend not to understand. "The bond." The word fell gently, but the forest heard it. Evelyn's gloved hand pressed over her heart. "It should not be possible." "No, you have not marked me." "No, then why can I feel you?" The silence after that was different from all the others. Less king, more man. "Because I chose you before the ritual knew what to call it." Her breath caught. Not from fear this time. from the terrible tenderness of being impossible and still being answered. Do not say things like that because you feel responsible for me. I do not feel responsible for you. His voice was steady. I feel responsible for the world that taught you to apologize for existing. Evelyn turned away, and the tears came silently, hot against the cold air, useless eyes finally spilling what they could not see. Adrian did not touch her tears. He did not rush to fix them. He stood with her beneath the snow until she could breathe again. Then he asked, "May I offer you my hand?" She laughed once, broken and small. "You keep asking. You keep being given too little choice." The answer undid her more than any vow could have. Evelyn reached out. This time, she found his hand first. Beneath the wool of his borrowed glove, her fingers looked small against his palm, but they did not feel weak. The thread in her chest brightened, soundless, like moonlight traveling through blood. Adrian inhaled slowly. "If I mark you, it will not be to claim what they tried to discard." Evelyn's voice barely held. "Then what would it be? A promise that no door closes around you again without passing through me first." Snow fell between them. The world narrowed to cedar, cold, breath, and the steady warmth of his hand. Evelyn lifted her face toward the dark sky she would never see. For years, people had spoken of marking as possession, politics, bloodline, duty. But standing there in the frozen forest, she understood that a true bond was not a chain. It was a witness, a living proof that someone had heard her silence and refused to leave it unanswered. When Adrian bent his head, he stopped close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath near her temple, far enough to wait for the only word that mattered. Evelyn whispered it into the snow. "Yes." The mark awakened like dawn behind closed eyes. Not pain, not fire, warmth. A silver warmth spreading from her pulse through every place the world had named broken. The forest went silent. The thread between them became music without sound. And for one impossible second, Evelyn saw nothing, yet understood everything. Adrian had not made her his shadow. He had made her impossible to erase. By morning, the whole palace knew. Not because anyone announced it. The North had older ways of carrying truth. A cook dropped a spoon when Evelyn entered the breakfast hall and did not pick it up until the soup boiled over. A guard forgot to strike his fist to his chest and simply bowed, slow and stunned. Somewhere behind a half-closed door, a maid whispered that the mark had appeared silver, not red, and another whispered back that silver marks belonged to the old Luna bloodlines, the ones people had turned into bedtime stories because history was safer when it slept. Evelyn walked beside Adrian with one hand resting lightly on his arm, not clinging, not being led, simply touching the place where choice had become visible. The bond hummed quietly beneath her skin. It did not shout. It did not pull. It listened. Every sound in the palace seemed clearer now, as if the world had removed a layer of cloth from itself. She could hear lies before they fully formed. Not words. Not magic in the childish sense. More like pressure changing before a storm. A tightening in breath. A false softness in the mouth. A heartbeat stepping out of rhythm when truth came near. The morning council gathered in the great hall under banners of black and white. Adrian did not sit on the throne. He stood at the bottom of the steps with Evelyn beside him, making the council face them as people, not decorations beneath a crown. Lord Hayes was brought in last. His shoes dragged slightly across the stone. Not from injury, from fear. Evelyn heard the tremor hidden beneath his careful breathing and knew he had rehearsed 3 apologies and believed none of them. The hall filled with nobles, servants, guards, and winter light filtered through frosted glass. Thomas read the petition aloud. Every word, every polished phrase that tried to turn exile into safety, removal into concern, silence into stability. No one interrupted. That was Adrian's punishment. Not rage, not spectacle, only the unbearable dignity of truth spoken clearly in a room large enough for everyone to hear. When Thomas finished, Adrian looked toward Lord Hayes. "You may explain." The old counselor swallowed. "I acted to protect the realm." Evelyn turned her face toward him. The lie struck her like a cold bell. Not painful, precise. She stepped forward before Adrian could answer. The hall shifted with her. So many people waiting for her to stumble. She did not. She had counted this room yesterday. 32 steps from entrance to throne. 9 from council table to center aisle. 4 from Adrian's side to the place where her voice would carry best. She stopped exactly there. No, she said. The word was quiet, but the bond carried it through the hall like a flame sheltered from wind. Lord Hayes went still. Evelyn continued. You acted to protect a version of the realm where no one has to feel ashamed of what they do to the inconvenient. No one breathed. You did not fear my blindness. You feared that I might notice what sighted people excuse. A chair creaked. Someone covered a gasp. Lord Hayes tried again, but his voice had lost its smoothness. My lady, you misunderstand the burden of rule. Evelyn listened to his heartbeat, to the small panic behind his ribs. Then teach me, she said. Does rule mean hiding people when they no longer flatter the room? Does stability mean locking away every truth that makes powerful men uncomfortable? Does loyalty mean signing papers in secret and calling it service? His silence answered better than confession. Adrian stepped beside her, and the mark warmed at her pulse. He did not rescue her from the moment. He stood as witness to it. That was when the hall changed. Not all at once. Courts never changed honestly all at once. But a servant near the back lifted her chin. A young guard stopped looking at the floor. Thomas folded the petition with careful disgust. The elegant councilwoman who had questioned Evelyn the day before removed her ring from the table and said, Lord Hayes does not speak for the full council. It was not courage, not yet. But it was a beginning, and beginnings often arrived wearing fear. Adrian finally climbed the throne steps. The hall expected him to sit. Instead, he turned and held out his hand to Evelyn. She found it without hesitation. Step by step, he guided her upward, not because she could not climb, but because the kingdom needed to understand that he would never again rise without leaving room beside him. At the top, he placed her hand on the carved arm of the queen's chair. The wood was smooth beneath her fingers, worn by women whose names had become portraits, legends, dust. Evelyn stood before it, blind eyes uncovered, silver mark warm against her skin, and heard 1,000 people waiting to learn what she would become. Adrian's voice came low beside her, meant for her first and the kingdom second. You once asked to be forgotten. Evelyn breathed in cedar smoke, candle wax, cold stone, and the fragile scent of change. I remember. The north refuses. No cheer rose. No music swelled. Only silence. But it was not the old silence. Not the silence of locked rooms or swallowed names. This silence bowed. Evelyn sat in the queen's chair without seeing the throne, the banners, or the stunned faces below. She did not need to. For the first time in her life, the room saw her. And somewhere deep beneath the frozen heart of the north, winter learned the shape of mercy.